violence, faith put to the test and hearts becoming cold, something extraordinary happened. Today, let's tell a story so amazing that it continues to thrill hearts centuries later. In 1572, in the small town of Goram, located in what we know today as the Netherlands, a scenario of war and religious persecution plagued Europe. In this troubled period, Catholics and Protestants were divided, transforming the churches into real battlefields. The priests were hunted mercilessly, and the Catholic faith faced the threat of extinction in some regions. Among the most feared groups of the time were the sea beggars, cruel mercenaries determined to eradicate any trace of Catholicism. Upon arriving in Goram, their mission was clear: to destroy the faith that lived there. A climate of tension hovered over the city of Goram when the sea beggars, a feared group of relentless mercenaries, entered their gates. Dressed in dirty costumes and shining weapons, the soldiers marched the cobblestone streets with determination in their eyes. The echo of their boots resonated through the narrow alleys, announcing the arrival of imminent violence. The inhabitants observed apprehensively from the closed windows, presenting the approaching danger. The main church of the city was majestic in the center of the main square, its Gothic towers pointing to the gray sky as silent sentries. The bells that used to peak joy now remained silent, as if presenting the impending desecration that was to come. The sea beggars advanced toward the church with heavy steps and fierce glances, determined to fulfill their merciless mission to eradicate the Catholic faith of that troubled land. The sea beggars invaded the church with unparalleled ferocity, demonstrating total disrespect for the sacredness of the place. The resounding sound of the doors being broken into the centuries-old walls, reverberating as a dark omen. Sarcastic laughs and mocking shouts filled the previously silent air of the church, profaning every inch of the sacred space. The priest and the remnant faithful tried to resist, but were few and defenseless in the face of the brutality of the invaders. The soldiers advanced mercilessly, pushing anyone who dared to interfere in their way. His cruel eyes landed on the altar, the pulsating heart of the Catholic faith represented there. In the sacred Sabbar, the Eucharist rested, the blessed sacrament, the royal presence of Christ in the form of consecrated hosts. For the soldiers blasphemed, that was just mere pieces of bread devoid of divine meaning. With gestures of contempt, they grabbed the golden cup and shot the hosts to the cold rock floor. One of the soldiers, with a sadistic laugh on his face, lifted his foot and crushed her hosts with a cruel and inhuman force. That unholy act echoed as thunder in the church once full of spiritual life, now touched by the violence of the invaders. The soldiers, initially incredulous in the face of what they witnessed, began to feel a chill through their spines as the consecrated hosts, desecrated under their merciless feet, began to emit a fine, pulsating light. An aura of holiness involved that place previously taken by brutality and disrespect. Drops of scarlet blood sprang from crushed hosts, forming an intricate pattern on the cold ground of the church. The sepulchral silence that followed the profane act was now interrupted by the rhythmic sound of the red drops that echoed as a divine lament. Some soldiers retreated horrified, while others remained petrified in the face of the supernatural manifestation that challenged their limited understanding. The sacred blood flowed in profusion, as if Christ's own wounds were being reopened at that solemn moment. The divine presence was undeniable and overwhelming, confronting the incredulity of the invaders with a transcendental and amazing reality. The miracle of the Eucharist, which had shocked the invading soldiers, triggered a series of intense and unexpected reactions. While the divine blood flowed from the profane hosts, a supernatural atmosphere enveloped the church, penetrating the hardened hearts of the mercenaries. Some soldiers, astonished at the divine manifestation, felt the weight of their unbelief become reverential fear. The invisible presence of something greater than themselves involved them in an indescribable spiritual hug. However, for other soldiers, the initial shock gave way to resistance and stubborn denial. The radiant light emanating from the bloody hosts seemed to confront them with the reality of a transcendental power that challenged their most rooted convictions. In the midst of the solemn silence of the desecrated church, each soldier found himself before a crossroads between redemption and eternal condemnation. The reaction of the soldiers before the miracle of the Eucharist revealed the fragility of their arrogance and the depth of their spiritual blindness. While some were taken by a reverential fear in the face of divine manifestation, others succumbed to the excessive wrath and the stubbornness to deny the reality that unfolded before their unbelieving eyes. The soldier leading the group, entangled in his own superb and unbelief, refused to accept what he had witnessed. In an access of fury, he openly challenged the divine power that manifested in that sacred place. In an untapped and proud gesture, he uttered blasphemous words against what he could not understand. His voice echoed through the walls of the desecrated church, challenging the solemn silence that had been established. However, the invisible hand of divine providence was already in motion, weaving the wires of fate of those soldiers hardened by hatred and unbelief. The outcome of this tragic narrative was about to reveal the inevitable consequences of the choice between humility and pride, between faith and denial. The soldiers, stunned by the witnessed miracle, felt the weight of guilt and inner fear growing in their hardened hearts. The vision of bloody hosts haunted them, confronting them with a divine reality that challenged their limited understanding. In an access of despair and confusion, the mercenaries decided to undertake a relentless hunt for surviving priests, determined to eliminate any living witness from the miracle that had shaken their convictions. Armed to teeth and consumed by a mixture of fear and unbelief, the soldiers searched every corner of the city in search of priests who dare challenge their arrogance. The air hanged heavily with the latent threat of imminent violence, while the hurried steps of the invaders echoed through the deserted streets of Goram. The hunt had begun, and the fate of the priests was in the hands of divine providence. The priests, after being captured by the blasphemous soldiers, were dragged to a dark and damp place in the ends of the city of Goram. There, subjected to cruel and inhuman torture, the priests faced the apex of the brutality of those who had desecrated the sacred Eucharist. Tied to rusty and private currents of food and water, the priests faced martyrdom with indomitable courage. Each blow inflicted by its captors was received with a serenity that bordered the divine, a resignation that transcended physical pain. Faced with the despair of the soldiers to deny the reality of the witnessed miracle, the priests remained firm in their unshakable faith, finding strength in the invisible presence of Christ that sustained them. Even under the overwhelming weight of human oppression and cruelty, their souls remained erected by the certainty that the sacrifice that they were about to pass by would lead them to eternal glory. In the twilight light of the dark and damp cell, Catholic priests and religious, weakened by the relentless torture inflicted by blasphemous soldiers, gathered in silent prayers. Their voices, embargoed by physical and emotional pain, rose in honest supplications to God, seeking forces to face the imminent martyrdom. Each breath has become a silent prayer of delivery and confidence in divine mercy. The acre smell of death hovered in the muffled air of the cell, intertwined with the smooth aroma of the unshakable faith that permeated the souls of the martyrs. In the midst of oppressive darkness, an inner light shone in the eyes of the condemned priests, reflecting the serenity and hope that transcended the cruel circumstances that surrounded them. The solemn silence was broken only by the soft murmur of the words of forgiveness and love to their tormentors, thus witnessing the victory of faith over hatred and death. The rising sun tints the sky in golden tones, illuminating the landscape that stretched before the martyrs with an almost heavenly serenity. The solemn silence of the dawn was interrupted by the sound of the heavy steps of the soldiers who came to pick them up to fulfill the final judgment. The priests, rising with dignity and courage, faced their tormentors with firm looks and words of forgiveness on their lips. Conducted to the execution site, an old gallows raised between centuries-old trees, the hammers remained in silent prayers as they awaited the last moment. The captain of the soldiers, observing the serenity that involved those men of unshakable faith, was touched by an indescribable divine presence. In giving the last words of farewell, the priests raised their voices in praise to God, thus witnessing the victory of hope over despair and light over darkness. The sinister ranger of the rope as it broke echoed through the silent clearing, but the souls of the martyrs had already risen in flight to the warm arms of the Heavenly Father. If this story has impacted you, subscribe and share so that the world knows that Christ is alive in the Eucharist. The history of these martyrs is a powerful testimony of the reality of the Eucharist and the strength of faith over death. May this miracle challenge us today. Do we really believe